My purpose as a social studies teacher is to teach social studies in history and geography and sociology and economics and psychology, and to do so in such a way as to lead students to a more broad and comprehensive understanding of the human world and society in which we live in. This would mean that they would learn how to be a more active and engaged citizen in that society and what democratic governance really means to them as an individual. I think of this as a calling of mine because I would be able to use my own knowledge and ability to communicate to relate these concepts of history and culture and governmental institutions in such a way that it makes them relevant and legitimate to the person's own life. And this I think is the heart of what social studies education needs to be, and what's often lacking in the way that social studies is taught to students in our modern education system. I think that the concept of being a citizen and an active citizen is really at the heart of what our government is based on and what we think of as our modern free societies are. And the principle of we the people coming together to form a more perfect union is extremely important to not just the basis of our government and our constitution, but also into what it means to be a citizen and to be an active and engaged part of this society. And I focus on areas such as history and governmental studies in teaching this because I think this is how we can more fully understand ourselves and our role in this society by looking at how these institutions have come about and how they've been formed. And in understanding this through the lens of history and studying the past, I think this shapes our knowledge and understanding of the present. And if we don't have that kind of historical comprehension, we won't be able to fully understand the world that exists around us and the reality as it is. And if we aren't able to fully understand our present world and the existence that is all around us, we're not going to be able to project our concept of a future that we want to have or be able to adequately shape steps to attain that. And so that is what the social studies altogether really encapsulates for me, is understanding and comprehending the past so that we can more fully understand our present and move together into the future. And one of the problems that I see with classic American history is that these are the faces of history, the dead white men on money. And for so many of us, that means that we have no place in history, or even if we can associate in some way with the great men and great events of history, it really is divorced from our lives on a day-to-day basis, and it really doesn't mean anything for us. It's just some abstract knowledge to attain. And in the same way, if our understanding of our government is reduced to repeatable facts about the three branches of government as if these were immutable objects that have always existed in this way or could exist no other way, I think that gives us a truncated and shallow understanding of what governance means, and how to be active citizens really is taken out of the conversation and the understanding completely. And this is something that I see myself changing, or being able to communicate these deeper concepts through the study of our history and government. And when we look at world government, if we only see it as a list of names and dates and places that all existed far, far away and long, long ago, then it's going to be completely divorced from our reality of our lives. Even if individuals place some connection to themselves and events or places in the past, it's on that internal and individual level And I see social studies and historical studies as being a group conscious effort to understand not just these facts and people and places, but how we all came to be and how our present came to exist and other ways that it could have come to be. And at the heart of this is the big questions that we can existentially ask of ourselves. But I think social studies should be teaching it in a way not necessarily to answer these big questions of where did we come from and what does it all mean and what will the next steps we take bring us, but in understanding and learning social studies, we can lead students to be able to ask these questions for themselves. And that, I think, is the key to the internal development of students and the creation of active and engaged citizens. So one of the problems with history, as I see it, is that it's presented in this structure of a straight line, one-dimensional timeline of one event after another that only leads to the next event. And this creates this image of the inexorable march of destiny, that this was the only way that things could have possibly been because this is the way that things happened. So when history is abbreviated to filling in the slots on the timeline, then it becomes again the abstract, memorized information and is devoid of meaning that we can place on it with a deeper comprehension. So if that meaning and the understanding of the why and for what reason questions rather than just the how questions or the what questions, we can look at this country as existing in a number of forms in a group of the native nations that existed in these areas, or how did it become or go from that to being a European colonialized separate territories, and how and why did those territories and colonies form the structures that we know today as the 50 states of the United States of America and create this shape. If we start from this shape and everything else is a straight line that leads up to it, then it becomes a sort of manifest destiny, and there could be no other options. But looking at history as a series of choices that were made allows us to see that these were artificial forms that were created by people, and those choices that they made created the present as we know it. So this would be an example of a timeline of history that shows turning points and active choices and events that create the shape of the present. And through this we can have an understanding of the future as being a series of choices that we can take and steps that we collectively take towards a future that we can either devise that we want to have, or towards consequences that we don't want to have, but we are taking the steps that lead us to there. And this kind of active understanding of history, I think, leads to active participation of citizens in their society, which I hold as one of the key goals of teaching social studies. So as we look to the generation of students that we are going to teach, the one primary concept that I want to hold in my mind and teach to them through these disciplines is that we all create the world that we're going to live in, and that students have an active role in their own education just as citizens have an active role in their governance. And this comes to the heart of what I think is valid about studying the great old dead white men of history, is I think this kind of understanding was implicit in the actions that were taken by those who wrote and signed the Declaration of Independence and wrote and ratified the Constitution, that they understood that as citizens they had not only the right or the responsibility, but the ability itself to take their ideas and put them into practice in structures of government. that we know as the government of our country today. And so if students are able to identify with the actions and choices that were made, they can identify with themselves as having a real and vital role in shaping their own society and culture going forward. So what does this look like in a history or social studies classroom? I think that it doesn't look like an individual memorizing information and knowing as much of it as possible and getting a score based on that, but it looks like a group of students that collectively learn and engage in dialogue with each other and form their understanding of the topic at hand, and ways that we can put it into practice going forward. Each one knowing that they have a vital voice of their own based on their knowledge and their opinions and understandings of the world, and in being able to read and think critically about the knowledge and perspectives of others and communicating that in dialogue and debate, I think is how we collectively can take active parts in our own education, and through this training be active in the roles of our students in our school and members of our community and as citizens of our nation and our world. And so that's really what the perspective that I want to convey to students as I teach social studies. And for me personally, the goal that I have of being an active member of my society and a citizen of my world is to put this kind of perspective that we don't have to have a world that's divided by color lines on a map or between people, and we don't have to be broken up into groups of allies and enemies that play a zero-sum game against each other, but that we can unite as people with common goals and common humanity and work on the same side and for each other. And all of our technological expertise and brilliance does not have to be put towards weapons that we turn against each other, but can be united so that we can fight on the same side and for each other. And going forward, I think my image of the future and the vision that I want to attain by being this active member of my community and a teacher is to apply that perspective that we're all members of the human race together and we all live in the same world together, and that we can have a future that we collectively hold this perspective and this understanding. And as Bill Hicks once said, in this kind of future we can explore the cosmos together in peace. And that's a goal that I have for us going forward. And being a social studies teacher is one way that I can impart my vision of the future by leading others to understand their own world and create their own visions for the future together.